Now, I had not actually intended this to be the first video for this channel because, of course, this channel's about prepping, but it's such a prescient issue given the dramatic and dangerous turns we're seeing constitutionally in the United States of America at this current time as of 2013. So this is actually going to end up being the first video for this page, and it is very important because as a Christian minister, I'm primarily speaking to Christian ministers and secondarily to the congregations and tertiarily to anyone else that would like to watch this video that's an American patriot or even those that aren't patriots. This video is about revolution, and a lot of people get excited when they hear that word. Some of us are very intrepid, and some of you are going to be upset by what I'm going to say in this video because you're looking for those to fan the flames. I would like to start with a quick anecdote about what happened to me on the set of The Patriot in about 1997, on the set of The Patriot with Mel Gibson. I was standing in wardrobe line, and there was this guy that was standing next to me, and he claimed to be a U.S. Marine that had returned home as a vet, and from Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and all those operations. And he transitioned over from speaking about the country and the dire straits in government, and within a matter of a minute or less, completely transitioned just from the problems in government over to, we need to take up guns and kill people. Now, immediately, my warning flags went up, and I tried to get away from him in the line, which was difficult. I struck up a conversation with another friend of mine and tried to distance myself because immediately I knew that though he was right about problems in Washington, D.C. with our government agencies, that in no wise necessarily leads to seditious talk. And that's what he was saying. What he was saying was straight up sedition and insurrectionist talk. And those are serious crimes in this state and in any state in the Union. So what we're faced with today is an out-of-control group of government agencies. And for those of you that don't think I'm informed, I'm wide awake. In 1997, when that guy was, I think he was an FBI agent provocateur, that was back in the 90s, when the ATF and the FBI were trying to gain more money for their agencies, I guess, by provocateuring more dissidents and insurgency or rebellious, seditious type activities in America to vilify the lawful state militia movement at that time. And I think that was that guy was probably just a provocateur to jump to that subject so quickly. But my point is that he was right about the out-of-control government agencies. And I wasn't fully awake then. I'd heard about the Trilateral Commission, the CFR. I did not understand in 1997 how deeply in trouble this country was and how we were completely, even at that point, being taken over by foreign interests, the Federal Reserve, banks, and these different groups. But I'm fully awake as a Christian minister. Not only has God brought to my attention all of this, and then there are plenty of Christian ministers that are out there that are advised, that are awake, that know what the CFR is, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg groups, all these other conspirators that are working to undermine the United States government agencies and the Constitution. But I'm hearing, and a lot of Christian ministers are now hearing talk, even in Christian ministerial circles, where Christian ministers are saying the same thing this guy is saying. And they're not coming from an agent provocateur position. They're genuinely concerned because they know that this is an Antichrist move, that America is an impediment to the Antichrist one world government and one world religion. As long as we're armed and as long as we're free or somewhat free in America, we are an impediment to globalism. And as our national sovereignty is an impediment to globalism. So they are trying to undermine our government agencies. But this talk I'm hearing, or I have heard, of people saying, well, we have no choice but take up guns, is wrong. Now, I'm not saying that people in Washington, D.C. don't need to be arrested immediately for treason. There are plenty of congressmen and senators and government agents that should immediately be arrested for treason. But I don't have a federal badge to go up there and enforce the law in Washington right now. And this is the other question. This is the initial question. It's a matter of by what authority. I think the legal term is quo warranto, or warranty. By what authority? I know, and you should know, that the government of the United States of America is us, we the people. And if you don't know that, let me refresh your memory with the little preamble to the most historic and powerful document ever written by men, not directly inspired by God, but based upon the Word of God. It's the preamble to the United States Constitution. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. We the people of the United States of America. The government of the United States of America is the people. It is said that the founders, and in the Constitution says that the powers are justly derived from the governed by the compliance and agreement of the governed. The ultimate check and balance in America is we the people. But we have a problem here as people want to use that authority and say, well, I'm going to go out and we're going to have to form a band of fighters or form a band of revolutionaries, and we're going to go to Washington, D.C. and clean house. And you say, well, preacher, how do you say that? How is that wrong? Because we are the government, therefore we should clean it up. In this case, we're going to refer back to the other most famous document in human history, the Declaration of Independence, and we're going to look at not only who is we the people, but where the authority comes from. In Congress, July the 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Let me repeat that. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, people want to quickly gloss over this and miss the historic significance and the historic framework of this Declaration of Independence, which inevitably was called a revolution against Great Britain, and in fact it was. It was a revolt against Great Britain for the purpose of separating and having an independent nation. They set forth in this first paragraph that they have to explain why. It's required by justice and by logic and common sense here that they have to explain why. And then they lay out the grievances against the crown that identified the fact that they were no longer governed by the crown. But what people are forgetting when they think that they should form bands of revolutionaries to achieve some military end is that these were people governed by governors and legislature. Notice I read this on purpose, the whole initial part of the document. In Congress, July 4th, 1776. This was the meeting of Congress, representational government of the 13 several states, the 13 colonies, forming a new union and declaring independence from the original country, which was no longer governing. And I'm not going to go into the quartering of troops and the Stamp Act and all the other grievances even that are listed in here that are just causes that we separated. But what we are seeing in the American Revolution is a throwing off of the ties, a separation of the ties between Britain and America. The colonies were saying, we're no longer part of the British Empire. We are United States of America. We're a separate group. We already have our own 13 governors. We have 13 state legislators. Now we have a Continental Congress. by which we have representational government at by federal, I'm using the original term federal level, at a unified level above the, not above the states by authority, but representing the states in a general union of a consensus between the states. Each state individually was governing themselves, and in each state there were county or parish governments governing the several parishes or counties in the state, and of those they had representational government in the cities. So there was multiple layers of governing agencies and governing officers in the Union at that time. This was not the French Revolution, where there was no Congress held of the cities of France, or I don't even know how they're configured in duchies or parishes or whatever. There was no consensus of the people with elected representatives throwing off the King Louis. They just went out and massacred everybody and slaughtered them. Then they got mad when the American colonists wouldn't support that slaughter. But we were an organized people governing ourselves, and we realized that the British Crown was oppressing us and was tyrant. Yes, the Second Amendment is not for hunting or self-defense. Yes, the Second Amendment is about the protection of the people by the state militias and the people themselves, the last check and balances, to be able to assault and arrest an out-of-control government agency. But by whose authority? If you're going to take it upon yourself to go out there and start an action, I didn't vote for you to do such a thing. I didn't agree to it. You don't represent me. By whose authority are you going to initiate a revolution? Unfortunately, in America, we are bound that in such matters, American patriots have to withstand the first barrage of those enemies of the state. We have to wait until those people, such as Dianne Feinstein, Harry Reid, Lindsey Graham, those that attack the Constitution in direct violation of their oath of office, the oath that we took, prove themselves treasonous, then we must act. So at this point, where we are in America is, yes, we are in dire straits, and yes, we are in a dangerous place, but we still have organizations of representatives that represent us, that have authority we have given them to take action. So your place now in the revolution that must take place, we must reform the country. We must, there's a sweeping need for reformation in America. Reformation, a spiritual reformation, church reformation, and government agency reformation. We need to clean Washington, D.C. up. We need to clean every state legislature up. We need to clean, first of all, city and county, town and city and county government agencies, where the county councilmen and city councilmen are in direct violation of their oaths of office, where they're robbing the people, where they're stealing and committing crimes. They need to be dealt with first. And if you won't go down to county council and shout down these crooks and file charges against them when you find them in corruption, how am I going to expect you to go to Washington, D.C., which is directly under the United States Armed Forces? It's the only place in America that they can legally keep and bear arms in defense of the area without violating the Posse Comitatus Act. I believe it's of 1869 is the year that was passed. So how am I to believe that you'll go up there and start a war, which is an act of sedition? Because again, any body of fighters moving on Washington, D.C. without the authority of the people is by definition an insurrection, and their attempts to recruit is sedition. And we should be very careful of that. We should treat it as such, because there may come a time that with these out of control criminals in Congress that are today debating whether or not they can throw out the Constitution, which is an act of treason. It is automatically, one of the highest crime they could commit, basically. While they're up there, you need to move and protest and encircle them to have them arrested and pushed, but there are still people in authority that we've given a limited amount of authority to deal with those people. You can file charges, you can take them to court and sue them. But as these people debate this, the people as a mass may get to the point with them out of control that they literally just form up on their own and assault Washington, D.C. And I'm not suggesting that. I'm not seditious at all. I don't even recommend that. I believe that we have rule of law in America, and we want to maintain rule of law. We have a civil society, even though it's not acting very civilly right now. And we know, I mean, you're a fool if you don't know why the federal government is putting out bids for 1.5 billion bullets that we know of in jacketed hollow point and in uncommon military and non-military rounds, calibers, I mean. You're a fool if you don't realize that they are preparing for war. The problem is that you cannot fire the first shot. By law, by rule of law, you have to let them expose themselves as criminals, and then you have to push for their arrest. Now, if it gets to the point that the people in a popular uprising just overwhelm, and that's the fools in Washington don't understand, that one day they're pushing so hard that they may actually get to the tipping point where the people of America, just all of us have had enough, and just millions of people just show up. That's what they were afraid of with the Tea Party movement. When we first went to Washington, D.C., they realized then that if we could mobilize a multi-million person force, most of whom were gun owners, that we could in fact take over this country by military force. And that is always the threat. We want Washington to be fearful of that. We want them to understand that we understand the final solution, that if everything breaks down and they destroy our governing agencies, that the people will establish and maintain law and order in this country, that we will maintain rule of law and they will be brought to justice. We want them to be fearful of that because that keeps government in check. When government fears the people, there is freedom. When people fear the government, there's tyranny. So we want that, but at the same time, it does not give you license to go out and start a revolution. Because again, you're not representing me. I didn't ask you to go out there. I'm not saying you can't defend yourself. If you're assaulted by a law enforcement officer or a government agent that is committing a criminal act, you not only have a God-given, but you have a constitutionally protected right to defend yourself. It's established in the Constitution, not in the Second Amendment like everybody thinks, but in the Declaration of Independence, where it states that you have a right to life. God, Jesus himself in the flesh, on the night of his betrayal, told the disciples, I told you before, go out and let him, don't take any script. Don't take any script, I'll provide. And don't take a sword, don't take a purse. But he said, but now I'm telling you, if you don't have money, go back to the house and get your purse. And he that has no sword, let him sell his clothing and buy a sword. So he has given you a lawful right to use military force to defend yourself. And go look at the Greek word. The Greek word he uses there is actually a military grade weapon. He has given you that and ordained it in his word, and in other places. And in Romans 13, he has given us, we the people of the government of the United States of America, and he has not given us the sword in vain. We are allowed to enforce justice and his moral code on this earth. He has ordained that. Not the governing agencies like these FEMA sellout liars and hirelings that are lying to you, saying just bow down and accept Katrina as a catastrophe and let FEMA railroad you and violate the law and we'll sort it out later. No, those guys are liars, and they will have their place in hell with the devil, who intends to raise his Antichrist and bring about globalism. But at the same time, we have to deal with the fact that we have organized government agencies and we need to work through them to maintain law and order. We have voted on these people. Yes, I know about election fraud, and I don't trust the results of the last national election. And even some of the results in the local elections have proven voter fraud at the local level. But still, we have these agencies, and you should move forward within the framework that our founders set up to control them. And yes, I know about all the nonsense about U.S. corporation of and all that. Forget that, guys. If there's nothing that can be done but go shoot somebody, then you're admitting defeat. There are plenty of lawful actions that you can take now, and you better take them now. You better be preparing for a fight. Not by buying guns per se, but spiritually, you better be getting your house in order. You better be getting all the sin out of your life so that when it's your time to judge, know ye not that you will judge angels? In the millennial reign, you'll judge angels, and yet you can't judge the smallest of things. You better be getting your life in order and making sure you're not breaking the law, because one day you may have to be a judge. And execute justice on people. Right now, we are not judge and executioner. We are the government of the United States of America, but we have appointed men to be judges, and we have jurors to go in and judge. And if you're not on a jury, you're not judge. And even the jury is not judge and executioner. We have executioners separate from the judges to carry out the judge's orders. And you are not allowed by God to be judge and jury and executioner unless it's a personal engagement and you are assaulted, in which case you have the right to defend yourself. But beyond that, you better be getting your houses in order and preparing for this depression that's already on, preparing for other things, not going out and talking seditiously. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a plan in case there is a breakdown of command and control in this country. We could be invaded by China or Russia at any time. So there is the need to have contingency planning, just as government agencies have, for a breakdown in command and control. You should understand what to do if a solar flare takes out on communications in your town and you can't speak and communicate to other areas, and you don't have news, so you don't know if we're under attack and someone used EMP weapons against us, or if it's just a solar flare and it's localized. You should have contingency plans for that. Your county, you should be getting on your county emergency preparedness groups to have contingency plans for this, and they don't. Unfortunately, most don't, for the simplest of normal things that could occur. So that's important and critical to emergency preparedness, but forming a military force to go out and take over anything is not. That is seditious talk, and it is potentially treason. It is insurrectionist. It is not my place to go to Washington, D.C. with all my buddies and arrest Congress and suspend Congress and establish some new form of government. Doesn't work that way, folks. You have to go back to your state and fix your state legislature and have them send forth, or either you can re-elect your federal representatives, but you can't just go out and start a war. They may start a war. And if they do, they are traitors and they are automatically available for arrest and a fair trial and a hanging. But let that be them. That is not our place as Christians. That is not our place as preppers. That is not our place as state militias. The state militias are the lawful form, and I'm talking about the lawful militias. I'm not talking about any seditious group. I'm talking about the lawful militias. I'm in a state where I'm in the state militia, whether I like it or not. We have compulsory service till you reach a certain age. And I'm here to say that when I reach the age that I'm no longer compulsory militia, I will volunteer and be part of the volunteer militia for those men that are over the age of service until I die. I will remain at the service of my state governor, and my local sheriff to fight against traitors and insurrectionists in this country and in my state. This is what we're faced with, is making sure we're within the boundaries of God's law and word, and within the United States Constitution and the Constitution of your several state. I know I'm addressing people in different states. In my state, we have very clear guidelines in our Constitution and very clear definitions of insurrection and sedition and what we will accept. And we did refine those after the Civil War, because the War of Northern Aggression. I'm sorry, I'm a Southerner, and we were attacked by Abraham Lincoln, and we responded in accordance. Unfortunately, a lot of good people had to die for our attempt to defend our state's rights, and we failed in the matter. But we were not trying to prosecute a war against northern states. We simply tried to leave the Union when our rights were violated. But that is the laws you guys have to understand. You need to know what your state constitution says. For those of you that swore an oath, like I did, to uphold and defend and enforce my state constitution and our criminal code of my state, you have to read that. I've read the United States Constitution, I've read my state constitution, and I know the criminal code portions that I was called to enforce in this state. And I never enforced the parts that were unconstitutional. You need to do that too. You need to get your house in order. But revolution, it may come, but it must come from the consent of the governed, and preferably through an organized movement. If the state governors all make a move against Washington, D.C. in self-defense and self-preservation, and ask your state to be involved and your state legislators, just as in the secession in The 1800s, that's fine. In the 1800s, when South Carolina seceded from the Union, it was a unanimous decision in Columbia, in the state capital of South Carolina. They decided to secede from the Union. They passed the resolution, and then they notified Washington. The other states, one by one, did the very same thing. In defense of their states' rights, their legislatures got together and filed resolutions or bills, depending on your state and how it works, and then notified Washington, D.C. That is one thing. If agencies in Washington get off the reservation, because remember, reservations are for government agencies, not for American Indians. Native Americans should never have been put on reservations, but we, through the Constitution I read you a portion of, did put our governing agencies on the reservation, and they should stay there. But if they get off the reservation, that's a matter for your state governor, who always has more authority than the President of the United States. The governors have always had that more authority than the President of the United States. That is the state governor as the commander-in-chief of the state armed forces, and the state legislature that represents you to take action, lawful action. And once they've taken that action, mount up, folks. If your state legislature makes a move to put in check a federal agency that has assaulted your state, you better arm up, posse up, and a muster when your governor calls you, and fight to defend your your state and your Constitution. If you don't, we will lose it all. We will lose the federal Constitution and the state Constitution. But it's all through lawful means. Let them be the criminals. Let them commit the crimes and sins. We have nothing to hide, and we're doing nothing wrong. Keep it that way. You have to, especially if you're a Christian minister. Yes, you should tell your congregants to be prepared for war. I am very concerned that these illegal and treasonous acts of Congress, these attempts by the Senate to undermine the United States Constitution, to directly violate it, will lead to civil war if they try a forced gun confiscation. And different states have different laws on gun confiscation. Some states have laws that prevent you from confiscating our weapons, and to do such is a felony. So if they attempt to do that in these states, it will lead to war. And you should be preparing your congregants for that. You should be preparing your friends and family for that. That is a possibility, but not that we're going to go over and take over anything. It's not our right. It's not our authority. You have to get consent of the people to act on behalf of the people, except in matters where the people are under a direct attack and you just happen to be there. And then not only do most states have a Good Samaritan or a Defense of Life and Property Act, but God expects you to defend those who cannot defend themselves, and to always, always, always fight evil. It is the obligation and standing order to all Christians that we are to always resist and fight spiritually through propaganda, through teaching and preaching, and if necessary by force of arms, to resist globalism and tyranny in all its forms. Only God has sovereignty total over all the people. Only God has full authority over the people of any country. And it is always the position of the Christian to defend life, freedom, and property of those who cannot and themselves. And this is not a call for being the police state of the world. I'm saying that is the role of Christians in the several countries, in the several states, to do this. But it's always defensive. God's warfare is always defensive, unless God himself tells you to go out and conquer a country. And I haven't heard my master tell me to go kill anybody in a foreign country, not in my entire lifetime. So keep that in mind. But again, I didn't expect this to be as long, and I didn't expect this to be the first issue to talk about on the Prepping Preacher channel, but it's that important. Make sure you establish and maintain the rule of law and law and order and justice in your area, in your state, and in your nation. But you do it by working through the frameworks that wiser men and better educated men than most of us established long before our fathers were born. So God bless and save His church, and God save America.